People think true danger waits in dark alleys. They are wrong. It comes when you are completely helpless, lying in a cold hospital bed, listening to the footsteps of the man you called your husband for 8 years, just hours ago. My life felt perfect, but as my 7-year-old daughter clamped her trembling hand over my mouth under that steel frame and whispered, "Mom, hide," I realized my entire marriage was a death contract. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Maya Revenge Stories. We are so incredibly grateful for your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us with no budget to continue operations, meaning we will be forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and transition our work over to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon community by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description or pinned comment, where you can listen to exclusive, longer, and more detailed true stories that we cannot publicize on YouTube, featuring multiple emotional voice actors in a single story. Now, let us dive into today's chilling tale of survival, experienced by a woman named Peyton Munoz. I was 34 years old, lying in a luxurious suite at one of the most exclusive private hospitals in Boston. The anesthesia was a heavy, suffocating fog in my brain. My body was a shattered battleground. Just hours ago, they cut me open. It was a brutal, agonizing cesarean section to bring my baby boy, Leo, into the world. The medical monitors beside my bed beeped in a steady, hypnotic rhythm, lulling me into a false sense of security. I was drifting, floating on the edge of the heavy painkillers, trying to grasp the beautiful reality that I was a mother again. The room smelled of sterile alcohol and fresh lavender, an expensive touch for an expensive hospital. Then the door clicked. It was not the heavy, confident push of a nurse coming to check my vitals. It was a soft, terrified slip of a shadow. It was Chloe, my 7-year-old daughter. Her face was completely drained of color, as white as the stiff hospital sheets beneath me. She did not run to hold my hand. She did not ask to see her new baby brother. Instead, she lunged for the heavy window curtains, yanking them shut with a desperate strength. The bright afternoon light vanished, plunging the room into dark shadows. She darted to the side of my mattress. Her tiny, trembling hands grabbed my shoulders. Her eyes were wide, completely wild with a sheer terror no child should ever have to know. "Mom, hide." The words barely left her lips, a frantic, breathy whisper that sent a violent shockwave down my spine. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to tell her that Mommy could barely move, that I was stitched together and broken, but a mother instinctively knows. You do not question that pure, unadulterated look of survival in your child's eyes. I forced my dead weight onto my elbows. White-hot agony ripped right through my lower abdomen. The fresh surgical stitches burned like battery acid eating through my skin. I felt the warm rush of fresh blood instantly soaking through the thick gauze bandages. But I did not stop. Chloe pulled my arm, her tiny fingers digging into my flesh. I slid off the edge of the high mattress. My legs immediately gave out, hitting the freezing cold linoleum floor with a heavy thud. I dragged myself, inch by agonizing inch, pulling my torn body into the dark underbelly beneath the heavy steel frame of the hospital bed. Chloe scrambled in right beside me, pulling my intravenous pole just close enough so the clear plastic tubes would not snap and alert anyone. We huddled in the pitch-black shadows under the bed. My breathing was ragged and shallow. I clamped my own sweaty hand over my mouth to stifle the miserable groans of pain begging to escape my throat. Seconds later, the heavy wooden door swung open again. 2 sets of footsteps walked into the room. One set was heavy, rhythmic, clad in the expensive leather Oxfords I bought him for his birthday just 2 months ago. It was Julian, my husband of 8 years, the man who was supposed to be in the nursery holding our newborn son right now. The other footsteps were lighter, wearing rubber soles, unfamiliar and clinical. "Is the kid secure?" a gravelly, low voice asked, the stranger. "The nurse took the boy to the nursery," Julian replied. His voice was casual, cold, utterly detached, lacking a single ounce of paternal warmth. I do not care about the baby right now. We have a very narrow window before the next rotation. Did you bring it? I stopped breathing. The air trapped in my lungs turned to solid ice. It is synthesized perfectly, the stranger said, the sound of a leather bag unzipping echoing above us. One push into her intravenous line while she sleeps. It mimics a massive blood clot in the brain. By the time the heart monitors trigger the alarms, the chemical breaks down and vanishes in the bloodstream. Completely undetectable by any toxicology screen, the doctors will write it off as a tragic, fatal postpartum stroke. My blood froze in my veins. A stroke. They were standing right over my bed, planning to murder me. No, Julian hissed, his voice dropping an octave, laced with pure venom. Not fatal. We went over this carefully. If she dies today, the probate court steps in and freezes all of the assets. Her tech company instantly locks down the corporate servers. I need her alive, barely alive, a deep, irreversible vegetative state, a permanent coma. A coma is significantly trickier, the stranger grunted. The dosage has to be exact to avoid stopping the heart completely. Make it exact, Julian snapped back. I am her legally wedded husband. If she is medically incapacitated, I immediately become her sole legal guardian. I hold the absolute medical proxy. But more importantly, I get full, unrestricted access to her physical person. Do you have any idea what it takes to bypass the Meridian Biolabs mainframe? I need her live thumbprint and her retinal scan. That biometric security protects a proprietary source code worth tens of millions of dollars. Once she is a brain-dead vegetable, I can roll her into a private care facility, pry open her eyes for the scanner, take the code, and sell it to the highest bidder. Under the cold steel of the bed, my entire world shattered into a million jagged pieces. The excruciating physical pain in my stomach was absolutely nothing compared to the violent tearing of my reality. Meridian Biolabs, my life's work, the unhackable source code I had spent the last 5 years of my life developing. He did not want a family. He did not want a son. I was just a vessel, a biological keycard he was about to permanently deactivate. Chloe pressed her tiny face against my neck. She was shaking violently, her little chest heaving with silent sobs. A single, scalding hot tear dropped from her cheek onto the back of my hand. It burned more than the bleeding surgical wound on my stomach. I stared at the expensive leather shoes pacing mere inches from my face. The man I loved deeply. The man who gently kissed me on the forehead just this morning. He was a monster, a ruthless demon wearing the stolen skin of a perfect husband. He was standing right above me, calmly discussing how to trap my living soul inside a dead body and steal everything I had ever built. Footsteps clicked sharply down the hallway outside. Someone is coming, the gravelly voice muttered. Get back to the waiting room. I will return when the shift changes at 8 o'clock tonight. Keep her sedated. Do not fail me, Julian replied. The heavy door opened and closed. They were gone. I exhaled a breath I did not know I was holding. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. There was no time to cry. There was no time to panic. I grabbed Chloe by her thin shoulders. Her eyes were wide with a silent, screaming trauma. Help Mommy up, I whispered fiercely. We have to get back into the bed right now. Getting back onto that mattress was a descent into pure agony. Every single muscle in my core screamed in protest as I dragged my dead weight upward. The fresh stitches tore further, sending hot waves of blinding pain up my spine. Chloe pushed with all her might, her small hands bracing against my back. I collapsed onto the pillows just as the doorknob turned. I threw the heavy white blanket over my waist, hiding the fresh blood blooming across my hospital gown, and let my eyelids flutter shut. I forced my breathing to slow, mimicking a heavy, drug-induced sleep. The door swung open. Oh, look who is finally awake, a warm, melodic voice cooed. It was Julian. I opened my eyes, fighting the violent urge to scream, to claw at his face. He walked toward the bed, holding 24 long-stemmed red roses. His smile was radiant, crinkling the corners of his eyes in that familiar, charming way that made me fall in love with him 8 years ago. To the young nurse fluffing my pillows, he was the picture of absolute devotion, the perfect, doting husband. He leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. His lips felt like burning acid against my skin. He smelled of his signature sandalwood cologne, a scent that used to bring me immense comfort. Now, it smelled like a freshly dug grave. "How are you feeling?" "My love," he whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was incredibly gentle. If I had not been under the bed 5 minutes ago, I would have believed every single second of this performance. "Just exhausted," I murmured, my voice authentically weak and raspy. "Everything hurts." "Rest, sweetheart. You did incredibly well today. I am so proud of you," he said, turning to give the nurse a brilliant, grateful smile. As he leaned back, the fabric of his tailored suit jacket shifted. My eyes darted to the inside breast pocket of his vest. Tucked neatly next to his expensive fountain pen was a sleek, silver, encrypted USB drive. It was a military-grade hardware token. I recognized it instantly. It was the exact type of device used to extract massive amounts of heavily encrypted data from secured servers. The weapon he intended to use on Meridian Biolabs. Once I was completely paralyzed. A wave of intense nausea hit the back of my throat. I swallowed down the bile, forcing a weak, convincing smile. "I just need some water," I whispered. Julian immediately turned his back to fill a plastic cup from the pitcher on the table. The nurse excused herself to check on the neighboring rooms. In that brief, 5-second window, my survival instinct took total control. I slipped my hand under the pillow and pulled out my smartphone. My fingers flew across the screen. I did not open my messages. I opened the device administration settings. My heart slammed against my ribs. Call forwarding was turned on. Every single incoming call from any number not saved in my contacts was being silently routed to a digital voicemail box. I checked my email server settings next. A custom filter had been quietly installed. Any email containing the domain for Meridian Biolabs was automatically marked as read and sent directly to the deleted folder. He had completely isolated me from the outside world, from my company, and from my team of security developers. Julian turned back around, and I shoved the phone deep beneath the pillow, reaching out with a trembling hand to take the water. As I sipped the cold liquid, the puzzle pieces violently locked into place in my mind. The realization was more agonizing than the surgical wound on my stomach. The last 6 months flashed before my eyes. Julian taking sudden, unexplained business trips to Zurich and the Cayman Islands. I thought he was just stressed with his own corporate mergers. But the most damning memory hit me like a freight train. Just 3 weeks ago, he had been unusually insistent about me bringing home the prototype biometric scanners to update my personal security clearances. He claimed he was worried about corporate espionage affecting our family. He had watched me recalibrate my retinal scans and register my live thumbprints into the master override system. He was not protecting me. He was mapping the vault. He was selling my life's work to an economic crime syndicate, and he needed my biological signatures to hand over the keys. A terrifying thought paralyzed me. Why not just kill me or kidnap me? Why the elaborate stroke setup? Because of the fail-safes. If I reported the data stolen, the federal authorities would instantly lock down the servers. But if I was the one who stole it, Julian was a master manipulator. I realized with absolute certainty that if I called the police right now, they would find zero evidence of his plot. The chemical was untraceable. He had likely already planted forged digital trails on my personal laptop, making it look like I was the mastermind embezzling the source code to sell on the black market. If I died, or if I suffered a massive stroke tonight, the narrative would be perfectly sealed. The disgraced tech director tried to steal her own company's secrets, and the extreme stress triggered a fatal postpartum stroke. My legacy would be ruined. My children would be raised by a psychopath, and Julian would walk away with tens of millions of dollars and complete immunity. I looked at my husband as he gently stroked my hand. I could not scream. I could not run. The police were not an option. I had to fight a ghost, and I had to do it from a hospital bed, bleeding and broken. "Close your eyes, Peyton," Julian whispered softly, his thumb rubbing the back of my hand. "Just go to sleep." I closed my eyes, but I was never going to sleep again. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a sharp, rhythmic vibration that cut through the stifling tension in the room. Julian glanced down at the glowing screen, his jaw tightening just a fraction of a millimeter. "Business," he whispered smoothly, leaning in to kiss my cheek one last time. "I will be right outside in the hallway. My love, just going to take this quick call." The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him. The very second the latch caught, I threw off the fragile facade of the exhausted, helpless mother. My mind violently shifted gears, burying the emotional devastation and entering a state of pure, cold, analytical survival. I knew without a doubt that my own smartphone was now a heavily compromised brick. Julian had built a digital cage around me, meticulously severing my connections to the outside world. But in his arrogant, flawless planning, he had made exactly one critical miscalculation. He completely forgot about the bright pink, plastic smartwatch strapped securely to Chloe's tiny wrist. I pulled my daughter close, ignoring the agonizing burn of my torn abdominal stitches. I tapped the side of her watch, activating the hidden developer mode I had personally installed for her last Christmas, just to teach her the basics of coding logic. It was a completely isolated, closed-circuit operating system, entirely invisible to Julian's network sniffers. I navigated through the colorful, childish interface until I reached a secure, heavily encrypted messaging protocol hidden behind a fake calculator application. My fingers were slick with a cold, clammy sweat, but I typed furiously, my muscle memory taking over. I was reaching out to Elias. 4 years ago, Elias was one of the most brilliant cyber intelligence agents working for the federal government. He was a ghost in the machine until he was brutally framed for a massive classified data leak, his reputation completely destroyed by the very agency he swore to protect. I was the one who independently traced the phantom digital footprint back to the real mole, clearing his name and saving him from a 20-year federal prison sentence. He owed me his life. Now, he operated entirely off the grid, an independent security consultant who trusted absolutely no one except me. The text I sent was strictly business. Code Black, Boston General Hospital, Floor 4, compromised by Julian, need eyes on cameras, need Overwatch right now. I hit send. While I waited for the encrypted digital handshake confirmation, I turned my full, undivided attention to my daughter. I cupped her pale, tear-stained cheeks, forcing her to look directly into my eyes. I needed her to be a soldier tonight, not a terrified 7-year-old girl. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully," I whispered, my voice hard, steady, and completely devoid of panic. "We are going to play a game of shadows. You must stay glued to the nursing station. Wherever the nice ladies in the blue scrubs go, you follow them. Do not let Daddy take you down to the cafeteria. Do not let him take you out to the parking garage. Do you understand me?" She nodded her head frantically, swallowing hard. "And Chloe," I added, my tone turning deadly serious, gripping her shoulders just tight enough to ground her. "You absolutely must not eat or drink a single thing Daddy hands you. Not a piece of candy, not even a cup of water. Promise me." "I promise, Mom," she squeaked, her voice trembling but resolute. I pointed a shaking finger toward the wall directly behind my hospital bed. "Look at that red square panel on the wall. If Daddy or the strange man comes into this room, and I tell you to run, you do not run to the door. You run straight to that wall. You smash that red button with both hands, and you scream as loud as your lungs will let you. That is the emergency code blue alarm. It instantly locks down the entire medical floor and summons the heavy trauma team. Tell me exactly what you are going to do." "Smash the red button and scream," she repeated perfectly, her small jaw setting with a surprising amount of determination. A tiny bright green light flashed twice on the face of her smartwatch. Connection established. I reached into the hidden silicone compartment in the watch strap and pulled out a microscopic Bluetooth earpiece, an upgrade I made last year, so she could secretly call me during recess if she ever felt unsafe. I jammed the tiny piece of black plastic deep into my right ear. "Peyton," Elias's voice crackled through the tiny speaker. It was low, raspy, and intensely focused. "I am already inside the hospital's central security mainframe. I bypassed their firewalls 30 seconds ago. I am looking at the fourth-floor hallway feed right now. Your husband is pacing near the elevator banks." "Who was the man in the room with him?" I asked, my voice dropping to barely a breath. "He was wearing hospital scrubs, but he is not on staff here." The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 5 seconds. The sound of rapid typing echoed in my ear. "That is not a hired street thug." "Peyton," Elias finally said, the grim realization heavy and dark in his tone. "Facial recognition just pulled a 99% biometric match from Interpol's dark web archives. He is a ghost, a highly specialized cleaner known in the underground only for staging fatal medical accidents. He swaps out prescription medications, manipulates oxygen tank valves, and induces sudden cardiac arrests. He makes first-degree murder look like a tragic, unavoidable biological failure." My stomach dropped, but my mind remained razor-sharp. The puzzle was almost complete. "Check my personal and corporate financials, Elias," I ordered, my brain working at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "Run a deep scan. Look for any recent offshore movements or shell companies tied to my security clearance." More keys clattered loudly in my earpiece. The wait felt like an absolute eternity. "Got it," Elias replied, his voice tightening with suppressed anger. "Oh, Peyton, he has been incredibly busy. 2 days ago, a shell corporation opened a highly encrypted banking account in the Cayman Islands. The primary account holder is listed as you. The digital authorization signatures match your exact biometric markers. He routed the entire setup through a hidden proxy server located directly inside your own company's basement." The grand design was finally laid bare. It was a masterpiece of corporate espionage and domestic betrayal. "He is framing me," I whispered to the empty room, staring blindly at the white ceiling tiles. "Julian is going to steal the Meridian Biolab's master source code tonight, dump it to his black market buyers, and route the payout of $50 million directly into an account with my name plastered all over it. If I suffer a fatal stroke tonight, the federal investigation will automatically conclude that I was a traitor who cracked under the immense pressure, dying from the stress of my own massive crimes. I can call the Federal Bureau right now." "Peyton," Elias urged, his voice urgent and pleading, "I can have an armed tactical response team kick down your hospital door in exactly 12 minutes. "No," I snapped immediately, the word leaving my mouth like a bullet. If Elias called the police right now, Julian would simply smile, put his hands in his pockets, and claim he was just checking on his sick wife. The cleaner would calmly dump his chemical syringe down a hazardous medical waste chute before the cops even reached the floor. There was absolutely no physical evidence linking Julian to any crime. The offshore accounts were in my name. The security overrides were tied to my fingerprints. He would walk away completely free, immediately file for sole custody of Chloe and newborn Leo, and I would be left fighting a ghost in a courtroom while he slowly, methodically poisoned me at home. I looked down at my own hands. They were trembling, but not from fear anymore. A cold, absolute fury began to pump through my veins, pushing the surgical pain into the deep background, replacing my physical weakness with pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I could not run. Running meant abandoning my children to a calculating sociopath. Running meant my legacy would become a cautionary tale of corporate treason. I was the director of security development. My entire career, my entire adult life, was built on designing inescapable traps for digital predators. "We do not call the police, Elias," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. "We are going to let him think he has completely won. We are going to let him initiate the download. I am going to build a digital snare right here on this hospital bed. and I am going to watch him choke to death on his own ambition. Get ready to reroute my master access protocols. We are going hunting." Night slowly swallowed the city of Boston. The bright, sterile glow of the hospital hallways dimmed into a soft, amber twilight. It was past 9 o'clock in the evening. The bustling daytime medical staff had long since vanished, replaced by the quiet, skeleton crew of the graveyard shift. Inside my room, the heavy silence felt thick enough to choke on. Julian stood perfectly framed in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the only exit. "She has had a remarkably difficult day, Brenda," Julian said, his voice dripping with an agonizingly perfect blend of fake exhaustion and deep marital devotion. He was speaking to the head floor nurse. "I would really appreciate it if we could hold off on the vitals checks for the next 4 hours. She desperately needs a deep, uninterrupted sleep. I will be sitting right here beside her the entire time. If her monitors show any changes, I will press the call button immediately." "Of course, Mr. Munoz," the nurse replied sympathetically. "We will give her some absolute peace and quiet. You are a wonderful husband. Try to get some rest yourself." The door clicked shut, the heavy deadbolt engaged. He had just built a 4-hour wall around us, an impenetrable window of time for a murder. Julian turned away from the door, the charming smile instantly melting off his face like hot wax. He walked over to the small kitchenette in the corner of the private suite. I watched him through the narrow slits of my half-closed eyelids. He poured a small cup of steaming water from the thermal carafe and unwrapped a bag of chamomile tea. Then, his hand slipped into his tailored pocket. He pulled out a tiny, unmarked glass vial. With surgical precision, he uncorked it and let 3 thick, clear drops fall into the steaming liquid. He stirred it slowly. The spoon clinking against the ceramic mug sounded like a judge banging a gavel, sealing my death sentence. He walked over to my bedside, leaning over me. The smell of the chamomile was entirely overpowered by a faint, metallic, chemical odor. "Peyton, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice a sickening lullaby. "You are shivering. The nurse left you some hot tea. Drink this. It will help you sleep through the pain." He slipped his strong arm under my neck, lifting my head upward. I did not fight him. I let my head roll limply against his bicep, playing the part of the heavily medicated, exhausted victim. He pressed the warm rim of the ceramic mug against my bottom lip. The liquid tipped forward, spilling into my mouth. It tasted horribly bitter, like crushed aspirin and copper. My throat screamed to gag, to cough it all up into his face, but I knew if I reacted, he would force it down my throat. I held the hot, toxic liquid completely still in the back of my cheeks. I swallowed loudly, forcing my throat muscles to contract on nothing but air, mimicking a deep gulp. "Good girl," he whispered, stroking my hair. "Drink it all." He tipped the cup again, another mouthful of bitter poison, another fake, loud swallow. When the cup was finally empty, he gently lowered my head back onto the pillows and turned around to place the mug on the counter. In that split second, I snatched the thick, cotton handkerchief I had secretly stuffed beneath the bedsheet. I brought it to my mouth and silently spat every single drop of the toxic tea into the fabric. I jammed the soaked cloth deep under my lower back, hiding it beneath the mattress pad where he would never see the wet stain. Now came the hardest performance of my entire life. I had to become a corpse while my heart was pounding 1,000,000 beats a minute. I let my jaw go completely slack. I relaxed every single muscle in my face, dropping the natural tension in my forehead and cheeks. I forced my breathing to slow down to a crawl, taking shallow, rhythmic intakes of air that barely moved the heavy blanket over my chest. I opened my eyes just a fraction, letting my pupils roll upward, staring blankly at nothing. Julian walked back to the bed. He stood right over me, observing my face with the cold, detached curiosity of a scientist inspecting a lab rat. He waved his hand directly over my open, glazed eyes. I did not blink. My corneas burned fiercely under the harsh fluorescent overhead light, but I kept my eyelids frozen open. He reached down and pinched the tender, bruised skin on the inside of my wrist, squeezing his fingernails into my flesh with a brutal, vicious force. The pain was sharp and electrifying, begging me to flinch. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted warm blood, but my arm remained entirely lifeless. "Perfect," he muttered under his breath. Julian stepped away, turning his back to me as he walked toward the large window facing the dark city skyline. He pulled out his own smartphone, the screen illuminating his cruel features in the reflection of the glass. He was typing a message, a signal to the cleaner that the target was primed and ready for the final injection. This was my only chance. My personal phone was a useless brick, but Julian had carelessly left his secondary work phone sitting right on the rolling tray table, less than a foot from my right hand, moving with agonizing slowness, terrified that the crisp white bed sheets would rustle and betray me. I slid my hand out from under the covers. My fingertips brushed the smooth glass screen of his device. I pulled it into the shadows beneath the blanket. The lock screen requested a 6-digit numerical passcode. I did not need a hacking program to guess it. Julian thought he was incredibly smart, but narcissists are tragically predictable. 4 months ago, I had found a hidden receipt for a diamond necklace purchased on the 12th of October. It was not my birthday. It was not our anniversary. It was the birth date of his junior marketing executive, a girl 12 years younger than me. I typed 101293. The screen unlocked instantly. A wave of sickening disgust washed over me, but I shoved it down. Emotions were a luxury I could not afford right now. I immediately opened his mobile web browser and typed in the heavily guarded, unlisted Internet Protocol address for the Meridian Biolabs internal server. Because I was using Julian's device, the network recognized his corporate executive credentials, allowing me to bypass the first 2 firewall checkpoints. I reached the master security portal. It demanded a root command. My fingers flew silently across the digital keyboard. I was not trying to lock him out. If I changed the passwords now, he would immediately realize I was awake and strangle me to death with his bare hands right here in the bed. Instead, I opened a back door directly into the biometric authentication registry. I wrote a silent, lethal line of code, a digital snare. In the security architecture, my live fingerprint and retinal scan were the ultimate skeleton keys. They were designed to open every single vault and silently download the proprietary source code to whatever external drive was plugged into the system. But tonight, I altered the absolute foundation of that architecture. I reprogrammed the biometric triggers. I set a trap so beautifully devastating he would never see it coming. When Julian pressed my thumb to the scanner and forced my eye open tonight, the system would beautifully simulate a successful access breach. It would display a loading bar. It would show the files transferring, but behind the curtain, zero data would actually move. Instead, my biometric signature would instantly trigger a silent, catastrophic national security protocol. It would automatically file an active cyber terrorism breach with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, sending our exact global positioning coordinates, the real-time closed-circuit camera feed of this hospital room, and Julian's face straight to the federal servers. I was handing him a loaded gun, firmly pointing it directly at his own head, and letting him pull the trigger. I deleted the browser history, locked the screen, and slipped the phone precisely back onto the tray table just as Julian slipped his own device back into his pocket. He turned around, staring at my lifeless body. "It is almost time, Peyton," he whispered, a twisted, victorious smile creeping across his face. The wall clock ticked with a deafening rhythm that felt like a hammer striking directly against my skull. It was exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. The hospital ward was an absolute tomb. The heavy air conditioning hummed a low, freezing drone that chilled the cold sweat pooling at the base of my neck. For 4 excruciating hours, I had lain trapped in a prison of my own making, completely paralyzed by necessity. Every single muscle in my back was screaming in agonizing cramps. The fresh surgical incision across my lower abdomen throbbed with a relentless, burning heat, demanding a physical relief that I could not give it. I was a living statue, a breathing corpse. I focused entirely on the rhythmic, artificial rise and fall of my own chest, counting the agonizing seconds in the suffocating darkness, waiting for the monsters to make their final move. Then, the heavy steel deadbolt clicked. The door swung open with a soft, ominous groan. Just before midnight, while Julian had stepped into the private washroom to splash water on his face, I had desperately grabbed Chloe by her thin shoulders. I pushed her small, trembling body toward the heavy oak door of the ensuite bathroom. "Hide in the shower stall." I had breathed frantically into her ear. "Pull the heavy plastic curtain all the way shut. Do not make a single sound. No matter what you hear outside." I knew she was in there right now. My brave, terrified 7-year-old girl, crouched in the dark porcelain tub, biting down on her own small hand with all her might to keep her desperate sobs from escaping. The thought of her shivering in the dark, listening to men plot her mother's murder, fueled a burning, violent inferno in my veins. I would not let these men touch her. I would burn the entire world down to ash before I let them win. Rubber soles squeaked faintly against the sterile linoleum floor. The stranger from earlier had returned. He was dressed flawlessly in the pale blue scrubs of a night shift physician, a black stethoscope draped casually around his thick neck, but his eyes were utterly dead, completely devoid of any human empathy. They were the cold, calculating eyes of a seasoned executioner. He walked straight to the side of my bed, completely ignoring Julian, who stood up from the leather visitor chair. The cleaner reached into his deep scrub pocket and pulled out a long, terrifyingly thick plastic syringe. Under the dim, amber glow of the corner nightlight, the clear liquid inside the plastic barrel caught the light. It looked perfectly innocent. Like ordinary saline, it was not. It was a highly concentrated, synthetic coagulant. A chemical bullet specifically designed to hit my bloodstream, travel directly to my brain, and violently solidify, turning my brilliant mind into a permanent, dark void. The fake doctor flicked the side of the syringe with his thick fingernail, knocking a tiny air bubble to the very top. He pushed the plastic plunger up just a fraction of a millimeter. A single, lethal drop of the clear liquid bloomed at the absolute tip of the sharp steel needle. "Is she completely under?" the gravelly voice whispered, stepping closer to my fragile intravenous line. "The sedative worked perfectly," Julian replied, his voice dropping to a harsh, eager whisper. "She has not moved a single muscle in over 4 hours. Her vitals are completely bottomed out. Do it right now." Julian stepped up right beside the executioner. He leaned heavily over my body, planting his hands firmly on the mattress on either side of my shoulders, physically trapping me under his dark shadow. I could feel his body heat radiating intensely through the thin hospital blanket. The heavy scent of his expensive sandalwood cologne was utterly suffocating. He lowered his face until his lips were barely an inch from my right ear. "You were so incredibly smart." "Peyton," Julian murmured, his breath hot and damp against my skin. His voice dripped with a toxic, sickening malice that made my stomach aggressively turn. "A brilliant tech director, a fierce, independent woman, but you were always so desperately blind when it came to me. Did you really think I loved you? Did you honestly believe I wanted to play house with you and these pathetic children?" He let out a low, dark chuckle that vibrated right through the metal springs of the mattress. "You were nothing but a long-term investment, my dear. A very complicated vault that took me 8 long years to crack. I played the doting husband. I attended the boring company dinners. I smiled brightly for the holiday cards, all while patiently waiting for your security clearance to reach the absolute highest level. And now, you are going to pay out. You are the perfect scapegoat. Peyton, tomorrow morning, the federal authorities will find out you completely emptied your own corporate servers. They will see the offshore accounts deeply tied to your name. They will assume the crushing guilt and the extreme stress literally broke your brain. You are going to take the fall for everything, and I am going to walk away a very wealthy, grieving single father." I listened to the man I had married gleefully narrate my total destruction. The absolute betrayal threatened to tear my chest wide open, but an ice-cold rage kept my heart beating at a slow, heavily calculated pace. I needed him to commit. I needed him to blindly cross the digital point of no return. The cleaner reached for the clear plastic tubing of my intravenous line. His rough, gloved fingers found the rubber injection port located just above my bruised wrist. I felt the agonizingly cold steel of the needle brush gently against my bare skin. It was hovering just millimeters above my flesh, waiting for the final, deadly push. My entire body screamed to thrash violently, to kick, to fight like a wild animal for my life, but I stayed entirely, impossibly frozen. "Hold on," Julian suddenly hissed, his voice sharp and urgent. "Do not push it in yet. If her heart rate spikes from the severe chemical shock before I get the full authorization, the biometric scanners might read a false positive and permanently lock me out of the mainframe. I need the live print first." Julian reached deeply into his tailored vest and pulled out the heavy silver military-grade biometric scanner, along with the encrypted storage drive. He plugged the drive directly into his smartphone, turning the device into a massive digital siphon. He reached down and grabbed my right hand. His grip was brutal, completely devoid of any gentle affection. He roughly manipulated my fingers, isolating my right thumb. "Say goodbye to your empire. Peyton," he whispered viciously. The needle rested heavily against the rubber port. The cleaner tensed his arm, fully preparing to push the lethal fluid directly into my veins. At the exact same terrifying instant, Julian pressed my thumb down hard onto the cold glass panel of the biometric scanner. He had taken the bait. He had fully triggered the trap. I did not wait another fraction of a second. My eyes snapped wide open. I did not blink. I stared directly up into Julian's arrogant, cruel face. The sudden, violent shift in my expression was like a brutal physical blow to his jaw. The smug, victorious satisfaction instantly melted off his face, replaced rapidly by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. Before his brain could even process that I was fully awake, I violently yanked my hand back, tearing my thumb away from the scanner glass with a fierce strength. I shifted my entire body weight, ripping the intravenous line completely out of my own arm, sending the cleaner's syringe stabbing uselessly into the empty white bedsheets. Julian stumbled backward, dropping my hand as if it had spontaneously burst into flames. His jaw fell completely open, his eyes wide with a panicked, animalistic shock. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, completely ignoring the tearing, bloody agony in my stomach. I looked him dead in his terrified eyes, my voice dripping with an icy, lethal calm. "You are in too much of a hurry, Julian." A piercing, ear-splitting electronic beep suddenly erupted from the scanner in his trembling hand. The noise cut through the silent, dark room like a screaming police siren. The small digital screen on the device flashed a blinding, violently bright red. A robotic, automated voice echoed loudly from his phone, echoing off the hospital walls, loud and utterly uncompromising. "Access denied. Federal security alarm activated." Before the echo of the robotic voice could fade into the suffocating silence of the hospital room, the heavy oak door was violently kicked completely off its hinges. It smashed backward against the wall with a deafening crack that shook the entire floor. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, drop your weapons and get on the ground right now." Elias stormed into the room like a hurricane, flanked instantly by 6 heavily armed tactical agents clad in dark tactical gear. Bright red laser sights immediately painted the chest of the fake doctor. The cleaner did not even attempt to run. Recognizing he was entirely outgunned, he dropped the lethal syringe onto the linoleum floor and threw his hands high into the air, surrendering without a single ounce of resistance. 2 agents tackled him, slamming him face first into the wall. Julian, however, spun around, throwing his hands up in a frantic, desperate display of theatrical innocence. He actually tried to play the victim. "Officers, thank God you are here. This man just broke into the room and tried to attack my wife. I am her husband. I was just trying to protect her. Please, you have to help us." It was utterly pathetic. He was clinging to his perfect mask even as it shattered into a million pieces. Elias walked right up to Julian, completely ignoring the frantic, hysterical lies spilling from his mouth. The former agent reached into his tactical vest, pulled out a small black digital audio receiver, and pressed a single button. Julian's own voice, cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless, echoed loudly through the small speaker, playing back the recording I had captured through Chloe's smartwatch all night long. I need her alive, barely alive, a deep, irreversible vegetative state, a permanent coma. Julian's face drained of every single drop of blood. He looked like a corpse. He stared at the audio device, his jaw hanging completely open, and then he slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wide with a complete, shattering realization. He finally understood that he had not been playing me. I had been playing him. I pushed the heavy white blankets off my legs. Every single severed nerve and torn muscle in my abdomen was screaming in absolute agony, begging me to stay down. But I absolutely refused. I forced my bare feet onto the freezing cold floor and stood up to my full height. I ignored the blood seeping through my bandages. I walked right up to the man who tried to bury me alive. "You thought you were a ghost, Julian," I said, my voice dangerously low, echoing with a lethal, absolute calm. "You thought you were the smartest person in every single room, but you left a digital trail a mile long, and while you were standing over my bed, gleefully bragging about your grand victory, I was not just setting off a federal security alarm, I was already inside your Cayman Islands proxy account." Julian gasped, his eyes darting wildly around the room, stepping backward as if I had physically struck him across the face. "That is right," I whispered, stepping closer, refusing to let him look away. "That $50 million payout you just secured from the Economic Crime Syndicate, the funds you thought were safely locked away behind my biometric signatures, exactly 5 minutes ago, I authorized a massive, untraceable wire transfer. Every single penny of their dark money has just been permanently donated to 20 different international children's charities under your legal name. You are entirely bankrupt, Julian, and tomorrow morning, when that syndicate realizes you stole their $50 million and gave it all away to charity, you will have absolutely nowhere to hide." Julian completely collapsed. His expensive tailored trousers hit the hard floor with a heavy thud. He began to violently hyperventilate, screaming in pure, unadulterated terror as the reality of his doom crashed down upon him. The federal agents aggressively grabbed him by his shoulders, slamming him down and locking heavy steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists. He sobbed uncontrollably, a pathetic, broken mess of a man, as they dragged him out of the room in absolute, humiliating defeat. As the chaotic noise faded down the hallway, the ensuite bathroom door creaked open. Chloe ran out, her pale face covered in fresh tears, and threw her tiny arms fiercely around my waist. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the physical pain entirely, and held her so tightly against my chest. Together, we walked slowly over to the small, clear plastic bassinet in the corner of the room. Little Leo was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling gently, completely unaware of the raging, violent storm that had just passed over him. 6 months later, the world looked entirely different. I stood on a brilliantly lit stage in San Francisco, wearing a sleek black dress, holding a heavy glass trophy as I accepted the highest innovation award in the global cybersecurity industry. I had legally secured absolute, undisputed sole custody of my 2 beautiful children. Julian had been swiftly convicted of attempted murder, massive corporate espionage, and domestic cyber terrorism. He was currently sitting in a maximum security federal penitentiary, serving a life sentence without the slightest possibility of parole, spending every single waking moment looking over his shoulder for the syndicate's assassins. As I looked out at the massive audience of industry leaders, I leaned into the microphone and delivered my final message. He thought the delivery room was where I was weakest. He believed that lying broken and bleeding on a hospital bed made me an easy target. But he forgot one fundamental truth. There is no weapon in this world more dangerous and ruthless than the absolute instinct of a mother protecting her children. Thank you so much to all of our wonderful listeners for tuning in and experiencing today's incredible journey with us. We would love to know, where in the world are you listening to this story from? Please leave a comment and let us know. If you found today's tale of survival and justice thrilling, we kindly ask for your support. As we mentioned earlier, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization, which means we have absolutely no budget left to operate here. Because of this, we will absolutely not be uploading new videos on this platform in the near future and will transition our work entirely to Patreon. Please help us keep these amazing stories alive by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community. There, you can listen to the absolute best, highly detailed, and longest exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publicize on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the QR code right on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link provided in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Thank you for your endless support, and we cannot wait to see you there.